Lawyers of Reddit, what is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case? A friend of mine is a lawyer and he said that a client once turned up to court in the actual same outfit he was wearing in the burglary. When the CCTV footage come up in evidence, the client looked down to himself and was like, "Oh shit. Lol." A friend of mine's client showed up to their court session with no shirt on at all. Luckily she had her husband's dry cleaning in the car and he was able to wear one of his. She truly wondered how he thought showing up half nude was going to convince the judge he was an upstanding member of society. Unfair dismissal case. The client claimed to have been dismissed without reason or following procedure. After we had started the case, it comes out that not only was he given 3 written warnings but he was also called in for a disciplinary hearing before his dismissal. Don't lie to your lawyer. Similar to a doctor, I feel like not telling your lawyer everything can just hurt you. The only reason I can see anyone having a valid reason for lying to a doctor is if they have someone in the room, the patient, who they can't tell the truth to. For example, sex. If I was at the doctor's with my family present, any one of them, and a doctor asked me, I'd say no. Not because I want to lie, but because my family are extreme Christians and sex before marriage is the worst thing to them. Had a similar case in regards to tenant law and an eviction order. Dude claimed he never got the written warnings of his landlord. 10 minutes into the case he admits not having checked his letterbox for months due to being over at his girlfriend's place most of the time and was afraid to find letters of his landlord due to missing rent. Still got him a deferral to pay the missing rent in full within 30 days to avoid the eviction. Of course he did not. Sigh. Not a lawyer yet, but I clerked for a DA's office throughout law school. Obviously we don't have clients, but I'll never forget this kidnapping case I worked on. It involved 2 Asian male defendants who were both the same age and looked relatively similar. Witness is on the stand and is asked to identify where the defendant who pushed an Uzi into his face is seated. It's clear the witnesses are having trouble differentiating the defendants. In a true moment of brilliance, one defendant raises his fucking hand and basically points to himself like, "Right here, bud." Hands down the dumbest shit I'd ever seen. I thought his defense attorney was going to have a brain aneurysm. It was a typical appointment/interview with the immigration committee in order to grant my client a residence permit. He was marrying a woman in my country with my country's nationality and this is a legitimate reason to be granted a residence permit. So it was a typical procedure. At least that's what I thought. The committee is bored to death and we all want to be over with it, so they ask him all typical and boring questions, like how did they meet, where they live, etc. They ask these things to identify white/false marriages. At some point they ask him if he was married before and he says yes, back in my home country and I am still married actually, never got a divorce. WTF. I was stunned. Double marriage is forbidden in my country. And he never bothered to mention this detail to me, neither to the other lawyer when we asked him. He later told me he said the truth because he was afraid to lie in front of a committee. An honest and stupid man. I got all my money though, yet we had to find another way to gain a residence permit. I felt a too real shudder of recognition reading your story. So many times I've asked a client the exact same question like 5 different ways just to make sure their answer remains consistent. Just to have them answer in the exact opposite way before the judge or decision maker during the hearing. Like, fuck, why even retain me if you're not even going to stick to the plan you're paying me money for? One of the unsolved mysteries of life, eternally. I did some personal injury stuff before I went into teaching. This wasn't my client, but rather the person trying to sue them for 7 figures. I imagine his lawyers wouldn't have been too pleased with the fact he failed to mention the 2 reality TV shows he'd been on since the accident. He was trying to claim 7 figures for a brain injury that supposedly ruined his life, yet half the country had watched him be perfectly fine on TV, and a quick Google brought all that up to us. Trial was supposed to last 3 days, we were done by that afternoon. I work for an insurance company. A guy sued one of our insureds for, among other things, loss of consortium, which can encompass many things but namely the ability to have sex with your spouse. We had gotten surveillance on the guy and had video of him having sex in a car with a woman other than his wife. For whatever reason his attorney took it to trial anyway. He continued to deny the ability to have sex. The video was played for the jury and the guy's wife who was at the trial. He lost the trial and his wife. A defendant was written a cell phone ticket while driving and defended himself. Your Honor, I was not using a smartphone while driving. I was actually using a flip phone. Guilty. Client in family law matters lied to me about using meth. Then used meth with the child in the room and the ex got footage of it on the nanny cam and then made excuses about why they couldn't do a drug test, then blamed me when they lost custody. Despite the fact that they didn't show up to appointments or return my calls, so I couldn't prepare any court material. I dumped the client after that and left family law. I'm a gal. I called and texted the father on one of my cases around 10 times in the weeks before the hearing. He wouldn't call back. If he answered, he would say he was too busy to talk to me. A couple hours before the hearing, I was volunteering at my son's school for an event and he texted me saying he was ready to talk. I let him know that I couldn't call. When I got to court, I found him and introduced myself. I told him I would like to talk to him after the hearing. He said, "Oh, you got time for me now?" The judge awarded temporary custody to the child's grandmother. When we left the courtroom, he started going off about how we are all unfair against fathers. Not only did the judge award custody to the grandmother rather than the mother, but he didn't really want to discuss his prior or current charges including DV, drug and gun charges that occurred in the presence of the children, lack of driver's license due to DUI, or refusal to submit to the court-ordered drug test. His lack of custody was due to my bias against dads. I'm still a law student and this happened during my first internship at a court. A girl among other people was charged with drug possession, but because she had thrown away the drugs and the police couldn't prove that she bought or owned the drugs, it could have been one of the other people as well who still had drugs on them. The judge ruled in dubio pro reo, equals reasonable doubt I think. He then asked if she wanted to say/add something and this girl asked if she can get her drugs back. The defense attorney looked like he was about to get a heart attack. Employment law matter. He claimed to have been unfairly dismissed over bogus performance management. The real reason, he organized via Craigslist to have someone collect a box of his cum from a children's playground. There were explicit messages from him asking what they did with it, and whether they rubbed it all over themselves. The employer provided us the messages. Edit, he was doing this on company time. FDA dismissed a guy for insider trading. He would access a database of drugs about to be approved, which nearly always caused stock to go up. He'd made millions buying stock in his family's name to cover his tracks. But he made a fatal mistake. He looked at the database and then bought stock with his work computer, which FDA owned and could search without consent. You click a statement to that effect each time you sign on. If he'd waited and done it on his own computer, they'd have had to get a search warrant, a much tougher proposition. I am actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was, that woman A had hit woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit B in the head, thus it was an accident and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a CCTV tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial. And the tape clearly showed in HD as A walked behind B, and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked something along, "Throne, eh?" And the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties he couldn't get the CCTV tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. If you like the content, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to hit the like button.